The Romans built one of the most systematically documented sexual economies in the ancient world. They taxed it, registered it, wrote laws around it, and embedded it in the architecture of every city the empire planted from Britain to Mesopotamia. When you visit Pompeii today, the Lupanar is one of the most visited sites in the excavation. Tourists photograph the stone beds and the wall paintings. Most of what gets written about Roman sex work focuses on the women who occupied those rooms. There was another category. Roman law, Roman social norms, and Roman commercial infrastructure had a fully developed parallel system involving men. It operated in the same bath complexes, in the arched spaces under theaters, in wealthy private households, and in the lower-end commercial establishments clustered around the city's entertainment districts. The people who occupied this system had a legal status, a tax burden, a permanent record with the Roman state, and essentially no legal protection worth mentioning. They had names, most of them slave names assigned by owners. They had lives that the Roman record kept only enough of to support the satirical and rhetorical arguments the literate class wanted to make. You are one of these people. The route that brought you here varied from person to person. What the system looked like from inside, it was more consistent. The route in. The Roman slave trade did not sort captives by sex before deciding their eventual use. Markets at Delos, at Capua, at the Forum Boarium in Rome, processed enslaved men, women, and children with the same commercial efficiency. A buyer looking for a particular type evaluated the available stock. Youth, physical condition, attractiveness, any existing skills, and origin all factored into price. For buyers interested in sexual companions or sexual service providers, the qualities they were looking for in male captives were straightforward and documented in the economic language of Roman slave sale contracts. The physical inspection at the slave market was not subtle. Dealers put chalk on the feet of recently imported captives to signal their fresh arrival. Buyers examined teeth, assessed muscle tone, and asked questions through interpreters. Dealers placed signs around the neck of each captive, listing what was known about their origin and skills. The vocabulary of these transactions is preserved in Roman legal texts about sales of defective property, because that is exactly what the Roman legal framework considered the entire exercise to be: the sale of movable goods whose condition had to be disclosed to prevent fraudulent transactions. A captive who had a chronic illness that was not disclosed could be returned to the dealer like a faulty piece of livestock. The humans involved in these assessments appear in the documents as the objects of the transaction, not as parties to it. You may have been captured in war. Julius Caesar enslaved somewhere around 1 million Gauls during the Gallic campaigns. The survivors of military defeats in Britannia, in Parthia, in Judea, in the countless smaller conflicts that kept the legions occupied across 3 continents, entered the Roman market because war was the primary mechanism by which the Roman slave supply renewed itself. Alternatively, you may have been born into slavery to an enslaved mother, which under Roman law meant you were born into slavery yourself and were technically your owner's property from the first breath you took. If you were freeborn and found yourself in this situation, the path was different. Roman citizenship came with theoretical protections, but those protections required economic standing to be meaningful. A destitute free man in Rome operated in practical conditions that were not always clearly distinct from slavery. Registration with the Roman aediles, the city officials who oversaw the trade, was theoretically voluntary for a free person. The economics of starvation are their own form of compulsion. A registered sex worker could eat. A man with no other skill and no patron had a narrowing list of alternatives. Registration, voluntary or not, had an immediate and permanent consequence. Once registered, you acquired infamia, the legal status that followed you forever. Infamia was a formal reduction in civil standing with specific documented effects. You could not vote, you could not serve in the legions, you could not hold public office or sit on a jury, you could not bring certain types of legal actions. In a society where civic life was organized substantially through patron-client networks and public participation, these exclusions were not incidental. They closed off the structure of Roman male social mobility at the foundation. The crucial feature of infamia was its permanence. Roman law provided no mechanism for removing it. A citizen who registered as a sex worker and later changed his circumstances entirely, who found a wealthy patron, accumulated money, stopped working in the trade, carried the registration with him for the rest of his life. The Roman bureaucratic apparatus was persistent. The record existed. What the record said about you existed too. And Roman social life was small enough, in the relevant elite circles, that the record could follow you into contexts where you hoped it would not. For enslaved people, infamia added a formal legal layer to a condition of social degradation that had already existed. Enslaved people were already excluded from the civic participation that infamia foreclosed, but for someone who had been free, the status change was irreversible. Whatever your circumstances before registration, whatever they became afterward, the Roman state's categorization of what you were was fixed. The distinction that governed everything.